story of the parish priest in Ireland who was given one of these microphones and was very, very nervous about it, wondering was it really working. So he said, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, the Lord be with you. There's something wrong with this microphone. To which the people replied, and also with you. I was in Brisbane in 1999, invited by the Uniting Church to speak on Catholic social teaching at the time. And it was interesting because they were themselves, as many other churches are, trying to see where they could themselves develop a type of social teaching which would fit into their particular traditions. In a similar way, I've seen this in the Russian Orthodox Church, who sent over the years to the Vatican, when I was working there, some of their people to try and see how they could carry out their role in the changed Russia of bringing a sense of social responsibility and participation into their traditions, which tended to remain very much in the exclusively spiritual domain, and in a very good way. So the Catholic social teaching, which we're here to reflect on, is something that is of interest, I think, to nearly all the churches, and are trying to find if they have something of that kind. Catholic social teaching is not a sort of a manifesto like of a political party. It's primarily addressed to the consciences of Christian believers, to bring them around to the idea that they have to bring the Christian message in a concrete way into the society in which they live. I think you've quoted there a phrase from the encyclical that we will only arrive at justice when we have and when we therefore are just people. We will only arrive at a compassionate and caring society if we are compassionate people. Catholic social teaching is a sort of a dialogue between an appeal to the individual and their responsibility, and to the concept of the social. And that's probably more necessary than ever today in a world in which, in many ways, our own personal philosophy and the economic model that we encounter are very much dependent on an individualistic mentality. I was asked to speak at a summer school in Ireland the other day, and the theme of it was a phrase taken from Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1936, where he said, "We've always known that heedless self-interest was bad morals. Today we know that it is also bad economics." That was written after the Great Depression in 1929. The problem is that I'm not quite sure if we have yet fully realized that that is true. And I suppose it goes back to my natural suspicion, maybe my diplomatic training, that I have a particular disquiet with adjectives. So when I read that phrase, we've always known that heedless self-interest was bad morals, the first word that I looked at was the word heedless. Mm-hmm. We all agree that heedless self-interest is immoral. But what do we mean by heedless? And very often, if you want to know how you understand a word, ask yourself, what's the negative? What's the other side? What's the opposite to heedless self-interest? Now, if you go around today's world, you'll be told very quickly that enlightened self-interest is not just acceptable, but in the long term, an attitude which in fact is favourable towards, vital for economic growth and the generation of wealth. But again, I'd have to come back and say, what a package of enlightenment would be behind this concept of enlightened self-interest. Certainly, enlightened self-interest is a strong motive which gives human creativity and innovation a particular edge. But the question I think we should really be asking behind all of that is self really the dominant notion on which to base our motivation for action in the economic sphere. The economy has a social function, and if we lose that sense, then we've lost very much the real sense of economy. And what Pope Benedict has been trying to do is to see how can you inject into a concept of economy which is based on growth and on profit. How can you build into that a concept of economy other concepts like love and justice, compassion, solidarity, and not to have them, as he says, just as an addition or afterwards. So therefore you have your economy which creates growth, and you have something else which has to be out there which mitigates some of the elements of growth. Now, Catholic social teaching has always defended the right to private property, and with that also even the right to profit. But it has also always stressed that all property is subject to a social mortgage. All property brings with it social responsibility, and that the primary part of Catholic teaching isn't the defense of private property, but it is the fact that the goods of creation belong to all. And the mechanism of private property is actually a mechanism to ensure that the goods of creation can be applied to all in a way that's just, and not have a type of socialist imposition and management of this. Now, we have to defend this right of property and the social mortgage. I'll give you one example. I was for a number of years the Vatican observer at the World Trade Organization, and there was a long debate which went on regarding intellectual property rights and access to medicines for HIV/AIDS. It was a complex negotiation which took place within the framework and the norms of the World Trade Organization. But it came down to a particular point that obviously protection of intellectual property encourages research. And those who are involved in the pharmaceutical industry will see how important it is to encourage that research. But if you lose sight of the fact that medicines are not there to make profit, but to heal disease and to promote health, then you've lost sight of the entire thing. And we had a very lengthy discussion on that occasion about the norms of the World Trade Organization permit a country in a national emergency to suspend intellectual property rights and for the government to produce generic medicines that would respond to that. The big problem is that applies to individual countries. The question was, what do you do in those countries which don't have the capacity themselves to produce these drugs, and how you go about it? This is a classic example of the clash between an individual right, which actually does generate creativity, and the need to respond to it. Now, during those discussions, I've never been visited by so many representatives of pharmaceutical firms who tried to tell me just how important intellectual property was, and that they ensured that I would be following the same thing. I had two other examples in my life when that happened. One was at the height of the international debt crisis in the late 1990s, when one of the solutions proposed was for the International Monetary Fund to sell part of its gold reserves and dedicate that to debt relief. And I got a letter from the International Gold Foundation saying, you are well known for your care for the poor and your concern for the poor. You will certainly know the effect that the sale of gold prices would have on countries like Ghana and South Africa, which produce gold. So that they follow every possible thing that might affect their influence. And they will even identify people like me and write to me to arouse my social concern for their particular type of investment.